Hello and welcome to my video on binary opposition and Lévi-Strauss. So this comes under media language and it's really useful for GCSE and A-level media studies. So Lévi-Strauss was born in 1908.
This is Claude Lévi-Strauss.
And he studied structuralism, so looked at similarities between myths and stories from different cultures, so in the same way that Todorov and Prop looked at lots of different stories. He noticed that these myths often featured binary oppositions in the way that two opposite sets of ideas, or themes, were generally represented throughout the story, so throughout the narrative, by different characters. And we can apply this to media texts as well, in particular film, TV, advertising, music videos, and there might be other texts that you think fit really well with it as well. So the most common one that we see is good versus evil. So if you think about the Harry Potter franchise, Star Wars, pretty much any action adventure film, you see good versus evil throughout the narrative. Rich versus poor is often used as well, and old versus young, tradition versus progressiveness. There might be other binary oppositions that you spot as well. There's a huge list of different possible binary oppositions. And it adds excitement and entertainment for the audience because there's a conflict between these two sets of ideas, these two themes, and the audience want to watch to see who comes out on top and how the narrative unfolds. So that's why producers use it. Binary opposition can be applied really well to the bridge, which you may be studying as part of your Educas Media A-level. So two of the main characters are Saga and Hanne. Saga is from Sweden and she has more progressive views, whereas Hanne is from Denmark and her views are more traditional. So it's setting up Sweden as more progressive versus Denmark as more traditional. So for example, Hanne discusses the view that there is no gender, only humans, and describes the view as a bit Swedish. So she's looking down on that view slightly. And this suggests the difference between the dominant ideology in each country. And then later Hanne snorts when the idea of gender neutrality is discussed and Saga questions her about it. So that's drawing the audience's attention towards the issue again as well. And then later, Saga uses the term hen, which is a gender-neutral personal pronoun. So instead of he or she, the term hen is used. So the closest we have in English is they, but it's not really quite the same. So hen suits that term really well, and that's typical of a progressive country. So there might be other examples that you can pick out as well throughout the bridge of binary opposition. That's just a good starting point. So if you're studying life on Mars, which you will be if you're studying the bridge, you'll be studying those two alongside each other. The most obvious binary opposition there is past versus present. So the 1970s versus the noughties, specifically 2006, because that's when it's set. So you've got Gene Hunt from the 1970s, and you've got Sam Tyler, who is from 2006. Each setting and the ideas from the 1970s compared to 2006 are presented through the way that each character behaves. So for example, Sam Tyler wants to stick to procedure and follow the rules precisely, whereas Gene bends or breaks rules when it suits him and justifies that by the results that he gets. So for example, when a witness called Dora is reluctant to share information, he pushes a table forcefully across the room and intimidates her until he gets the information because she's reluctant to cooperate and distrustful of the police and doesn't really want to help them. And then initially the characters don't get on and there's conflict between them, but actually as the episode unfolds they end up working together really well because their differences complement each other and they form a successful partnership. So that's quite an interesting way that the narrative is sometimes resolved in binary opposition, whereas sometimes it's that one set of ideas is superior to the other. So that in that one, it's just the difference really between them. And the fact that obviously in 2006 things are done, you know, sort of more following the rules more closely, which is a good thing overall. You might also want to apply it to your music texts. So if you're doing a UCAS, you might be looking at Dizzy Rascal and Dream, or you might be looking at Beyonce and Formation. So I'm just going to talk about Dizzy Rascal because that's the one that we teach. So in Dizzy Rascal, the binary opposition that you have is old versus young, black versus white, and past versus present. So the 1950s versus 2013. So the video opens with an older woman playing the piano, and the mise-en-scene establishes the setting as 1950s from what she's wearing and the styling of her hair and the curtains and the decor in the room as well. When she sees Dizzy, she seems slightly shocked and alarmed. She keeps kind of looking back at the audience with a slight puzzled, bewildered look. And then back at Dizzy. And the clothing of Dizzy Rascal helps reflect the modern time period. So the fact that he's wearing a hoodie and he's wearing jogging bottoms, and the puppets are dressed similarly as well. And this binary opposition is used to represent that racist attitudes are still present, and Dizzy describes the discrimination and the way that he's been treated throughout his life, and sort of looking back at his childhood and his experiences as a teenager. So it can be used to show a negative aspect in society as well. So basically this binary opposition, usually there's a set of ideas or an ideology behind it. So it's used to show a contrast in some way, and that contrast helps to deliver a message to the audience. So there might be other texts that you want to apply it to as well. Once you know the theory, it's really easy to apply it to other media texts, especially in the unseen question, for example. Depending on what the question is, you might want to use your theory and apply it. So I hope this video was helpful, and take care and stay safe.